Okay, let's unpack this central question. Is the current political pressure on public education, the book bans, the curriculum fights, is it actually a deliberate, almost classic authoritarian tactic aimed at weakening democracy itself?
That's the provocative assertion right at the heart of the book we're looking at today.
Hmm.
It definitely raises the stake.
It really does. And look, today we're doing something a bit different. Enjoy a bold new take on book coverage with this extended analysis. So it's more than just a summary, though we have that too.
hmm
This feature really examines how the author builds her argument, how she tries to gain influence, and frankly, earns or maybe loses your trust. It should give you tools to read with sharper insight.
Right, better discernment.
Exactly. Thinking about reading this book, this should help. Also, it could be great for aspiring writers seeing how arguments are constructed.
Definitely.
And if you find this expanded format valuable, please let us know. Your feedback really helps us figure out future content.
And just so you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM. We're using it for, well, a deeper, more dynamic kind of book analysis as we explore Randi Weingarten's Why Fascists Fear Teachers.
So let's start with the basics, maybe the 25% summary view. What's Weingarten's core case here?
Well, her main purpose seems pretty clear. It's a warning. She wants to galvanize resistance against what she identifies as authoritarian moves to control education happening right now.
And the central argument.
It's essentially that strong public schools with empowered teachers are fundamental. She sees them as like bulwarks against tyranny and absolutely necessary engines for a healthy democracy.
Okay, and she brings a certain weight to this argument herself, doesn't she? Her background plays a role.
Oh, absolutely. Her credibility, her ethos is built on deep institutional knowledge. As president of the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT, she's not just an observer.
She's been in the thick of it.
Exactly. Years of high-profile public debates, plus, representing educators on the front lines. This combination gives her immediate authority on the topic. It's not just theory for her.
And that authority feels particularly relevant given when the book came out. The timing 2025 seems critical.
It really is. The publication lands right in the midst of these escalating political fights over schools. Things often linked to right-wing or even far-right groups and, well, broader political trends trying to shape education.
So she's writing directly into that storm, the pushes to defund public schools, the promotion of vouchers and privatization, and maybe most visibly, the censorship efforts.
Precisely. The book bans the curriculum, controls the timing, allows her to address these head-on as part of that larger pattern she's describing.
And what about the tone? How does it feel to read?
It's intense. I'd say urgent, definitely defiant, but also there's a real compassion there. She calls it a love letter to teachers at points.
A love letter mixed with a warning siren?
That's a good way to put it. It's celebrating teachers, but also sounding this very serious historical alarm about what happens if education is compromised.
Okay, so let's move beyond the summary and get into the analysis part. How does she actually build this argument? What's the logic, the evidence connecting today's politics to historical authoritarianism?
Her core logic, the logos, rests on outlining what she sees as a consistent mechanism of control used by authoritarians throughout history.
Okay.
She argues that regimes aiming for total control, think Mussolini's Italy, or the early stages in Nazi Germany. They knew they had to systematically undermine things like critical thinking.
Anything that fosters independent thought.
Right, and pluralism, the acceptance of different viewpoints. These regimes targeted institutions, especially education, that encouraged questioning or diverse perspectives, because that independence is a threat to their control.
And how does she say that historical mechanism is playing out now? What are the specific tactics she identifies today? It can't just be a theoretical link.
No, she gets specific. She names 4 main methods being used to weaken public schools. First, defunding. She points to things like voucher systems, arguing that while they're often framed as parental choice, their practical effect, she argues, is to drain needed resources from the public system. Second, privatization, which she contends weakens community oversight and accountability.
Okay, defunding privatization.
Yeah.
What else?
Third, she talks about deliberately stoking division, pitting parents against teachers, for example, creating mistrust. And fourth, the one getting maybe the most attention, systematic censorship.
The book bans and curriculum restrictions?
Exactly. Limiting what students can learn about history, social issues, different identities, basically controlling the narrative.
That lays out a logical case, but invoking fascism requires more than just logic. It feels like there needs to be a strong emotional component. How does she use pathos, emotional appeals?
Oh, heavily. The book relies a lot on powerful storytelling. It's filled with these quite vivid anecdotes illustrating the dedication, sometimes the sacrifices, of everyday teachers. That builds empathy right away.
You connect with the people involved.
Yes. But the most potent emotional tool she uses is undoubtedly the historical analogy.
And this is probably where things get the most heated, the most controversial.
I think so. She makes direct comparisons between the struggles teachers face today dealing with censorship, political pressure, and the resistance shown by educators under extreme repression historically. Specifically, she cites teachers during World War II under Nazi occupation.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, teachers who secretly continued to teach forbidden subjects, critical thinking, despite the immense danger. Drawing that parallel is designed to evoke deep empathy for today's teachers and real outrage against the forces she sees opposing them.
And by highlighting that kind of historical heroism, she's also bolstering her own credibility, her ethos with her core audience, right? It's like saying, we share these fundamental democratic values, this commitment.
Precisely. It frames the current struggle as something much bigger than just policy disputes or union contracts. It becomes about defending part principles.
This brings us nicely to the language itself. How does the way she writes, her diction and style, reinforce this high-stakes narrative?
The language is definitely charged. It's a mix of direct, almost urgent calls to action alongside those illustrative, often emotional stories.
And specific word choices probably stand out.
They do. Words like siege, heroism, authoritarianism, they appear repeatedly. It's strategic. She also uses repetition effectively, hammering home key themes, like the phrase, teachers are under siege for what they do right.
Which reframes criticism entirely.
Exactly. It turns standard professional challenges or policy debates into acts of resistance against an oppressive force.
Let's talk more about those historical references, the allusions. That seems central to her framing.
Absolutely central. She uses very clear, stark historical examples. Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, Pinochet's Chile. This isn't subtle. The goal is to frame current political conflicts in the most urgent historical terms possible.
So opponents aren't just critics of current education policy.
In her framing, they become potential heirs to historical tyranny. It's a powerful rhetorical move. She sets up this constant contrast, this juxtaposition throughout the book.
How so?
She repeatedly contrasts the vision of a democratic society, nurtured by teachers fostering critical thought, against an authoritarian one based on control and suppression, embodied by fascists. It forces a choice, really. It paints the picture with very sharp lines, leaving little room for middle ground.
And how is the book structured to carry this argument forward?
It moves between different modes. You get sections looking at history chronologically, then personal stories from modern teachers, then broader analysis of these authoritarian tactics, and finally it shifts towards prescriptive advice. What can be done? How to resist?
Keeps the momentum going.
Yes, it aims to keep the reader both emotionally engaged with the stories and intellectually convinced by the analysis, ultimately leading them toward taking action.
Okay, let's pause here for a moment. If you appreciate this kind of in-depth breakdown, digging into how arguments are made, remember that Mindful Moments is our YouTube channel. We offer AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques, all aimed at inspiring reflection and, well, rational thought.
All right, so shifting gears slightly now to evaluation. How effective is the book ultimately? Does it achieve what it sets out to do?
Well, for its intended audience, I'd say it's likely very effective. It seems quite successful at stirring concern, maybe even alarm, and definitely fostering resolve among people already sympathetic educators, many parents, those committed to pluralism in education.
So for that group, the mix of passionate storytelling and stark analysis really lands.
It seems to. It gives them language and a framework for their concerns. But that very success points toward its major limitation, doesn't it?
Polarization.
Exactly. The highly charged, maybe even alarmist tone and that strict democratic versus authoritarian framing, it runs a significant risk of alienating people who might be on the fence, or those who have legitimate criticisms of public schools but don't see themselves as authoritarians.
You can shut down conversation for some.
Potentially, yes. Which brings us to the logical counterpoint we need to consider, just reporting neutrally on the criticisms. While that core idea that authoritarianism attacks education has historical weight, many critics argue that using such high-stakes language, particularly fascist, obscures other factors, specifically the role and motives of the union itself.
Right. The argument from critics often goes, is this purely about defending democracy and children? Or is it also significantly about preserving the union's institutional power, its influence, membership, collective bargaining rights?
They might suggest the fascist label is a tactic to dismiss legitimate debate about things like school performance, budget priorities, or curriculum transparency.
It's framed as a way to shut down critique, rather than engage with it. Now, how does Weingarten handle that line of criticism in the book? Does she address it directly?
It's interesting. The analysis suggests she anticipates this criticism, but mostly chooses not to engage with it on, say, a policy-by-policy level or by defending the union's power structure directly.
So what's her strategy instead?
It seems she primarily rebuts it through testimony and anecdote. She focuses relentlessly on the ethical commitment, the daily work, the personal sacrifices of individual teachers. The narrative emphasizes their dedication, implicitly countering the idea that the union's motives are purely about power or politics.
So steering the focus back to the individuals on the ground, rather than the institution's perceived political machinery.
That appears to be the main technique, elevating the moral standing of the teachers to counter critiques of the organization.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what's the takeaway for someone trying to understand this issue, maybe deciding whether to read the book?
Well, it seems the book is highly effective as what you might call a polemic, a passionate, persuasive argument designed to mobilize its base and clarify the stakes for those already concerned about these trends in education.
So essential reading if you're deeply invested in that political struggle.
Probably, but, and this is the key point for discernment, that same intensity and the stark partisan framing might really limit its ability to persuade people outside that circle. Those who are maybe undecided or trying to weigh different arguments about school reform might find the tone pushes them away rather than drawing them in.
It offers clarity and resolve for the committed, perhaps, but maybe less nuance for those still evaluating.
That seems a fair assessment. Which leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to reflect on.
Okay.
Considering the author's really powerful use of these high-stakes historical comparisons invoking Nazi Germany, other fascist regimes, how does that extreme framing affect our ability as readers or citizens to rationally evaluate current political actions?
That's a great question. Does it appropriately galvanize people against a real danger, or does it risk, I don't know, desensitizing us? Making it harder to judge present-day issues on their own merits because the volume is always turned up so high.
Does it help clarify, or does it potentially obscure by using such loaded historical weight? Something to definitely think about.
A crucial point for critical engagement.
Absolutely. And if you want to dive deeper into the book's content itself, click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. And please subscribe, share, consider purchasing the book via the link if interested, and above all, think rationally.
And don't forget to check out the many other genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.